Welcome to Johnny Cant Sleep. This is a podcast about topics you think about late at night because you can't fall asleep and your mind wanders to these crazy places and you have these crazy thoughts, and while you lie awake there, you may wonder what others may think about some of these topics. I am your host, Dustin, and we will have a variety of other guest hosts and co-hosts as we go through various different topics. This has been a long time running, and we have many pages of topics, and so it should definitely be a lot of fun. This is episode 1. Today we will be joined by my good friend, one of my best friends, Cameron. Today the topic will be, are kids more responsible today, or were they more responsible when we were younger and we were growing up? And we'll discuss what we've been through as kids. I grew up in the Midwest. Cameron grew up halfway around the world, and so we'll probably have some various cool perspectives on things as we go over some of these things. This is episode 1, so if you are patient with us, we will get into some great topics, and hopefully we'll get a good following as we move along. So we'll get into today's topic. Were kids more responsible when we were growing up, and what kind of things did we go through as kids versus what kids are doing now? And obviously when we grew up in a little bit more of a analog childhood and digital adulthood, so things have drastically changed for kids nowadays versus how it was with us. Our parents didn't know where we were at half of the time in the summertime if we weren't at school. So we'll kind of talk about some of that stuff. I took a few notes of a few things I wanted to mention, and don't know what Cameron is going to say because he's a very interesting person too, and I know he grew up in other parts of the world, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, before he came to the US, so I'm super interested in what he has to say also. We met in college, so we probably talked a bit about certain things, but a lot of that stuff probably many years ago. So it'll be kind of nice to refresh and go over some of those details and topics and things like that. And we probably will have a lot of fun in some of these topics and discussions. I know when I was growing up, pre-teen and teenager, like the pursuit of money was huge for me. Parents didn't hand you a bunch of money, not me anyhow, in the Midwest. So it's one of those things you were always trying to figure out how to make money and what you could do to make money. You always wanted things, wanted new albums from whatever groups you liked. My boy and I were talking about that the other day, how it's different now. Everything's digital. Like back in the day, if you wanted the latest album or whatever, you had to save up money and go to the record store and buy it in tape form or whatever for 10 or 12 bucks, which was a lot of money for kids in those days. So anyhow, things have changed a lot. So I'll let Cameron talk for a minute about how he grew up, and we'll get into some of these various topics. Go ahead and take the floor, Cameron. Let us know a little bit about kind of where you grew up and like what ages you lived in, what places, and what life was like.
Yes, so I grew up in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. My younger years was in Pakistan, and then I moved to Saudi where my dad worked. And then we went back and forth every summer to go to Pakistan, or every so many months, depending on the school year, and Saudi. So then I came to the U.S. at a very young age. I went to U.S. Nebraska with Dustin. We pledged the fraternity together. That's a whole new story we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah, we'll get into fraternity stories later on, I'm sure.
Experience. So growing up, my pursuit was, my parents were fairly affluent, so my pursuit was a little different. I could get pocket money. I'm talking now the teenage years. I happened to have a motorcycle at that time and a camera. So the passion of photography was something that I had when I was very, very young. And then also when I had my wheels, I realized that I had all this freedom, and I lived in a very large city at that time where you can literally take as twins, like also like Minneapolis, St. Paul, like a twin city type thing. One side is super brand new city with lots of pastry shops and burger joints, and one is a very 800-year-old just city, which is row houses and winding streets and all that. So there was too much to explore, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta see this. I gotta have something here, or some dessert here, or some food here. So honestly, I was And yes, skipping school was also my favorite when I had the motorcycle, because no one had iPhones, no one's tracking you. You were just, if you feel like you two your friends are just, skip schools. Now, not every household had phones. Just to let you know, affluent people had phones, and not every principal had a phone number of their parents. So if you happen to be sick, 2 days, on a Thursday and a Friday, well, no, Friday was a day off, Wednesday or Thursday, he did that like once a month. It was pretty easy to do. And so you just get up in the morning, and I'm not telling people how to skip school or what we did, but it's quite an adventure that you go out and then you have more time to explore, because when you got home after school, you're like, okay, well, now I have only like so many hours left, especially wintertime. The sun goes down pretty quick, same any part of the world. So you want to get out and
Hey,
go.
pause for a second. Hey, remind me. I have a school skipping story to tell you
Yeah,
in a little bit too. I don't want to forget. So anyhow, go ahead.
This podcast is going to take its own life here. So, anyways, that allowed me to meet different kinds of people. And this is interesting, that how when your parents tell you, hey, don't go away from house too far, you may get kidnapped, or the things like these third world countries still have anyways. None of that actually happened. That was sort of whatever they knew from their past. People were generally very nice. I interacted with adults I never met. For example, there's a huge construction site and they're building this gigantic towers, and they had a little restaurant, the makeshift restaurant, and they're making this amazing curry and then fresh bread. I said, well, I kind of want to eat that. I was like, oh my God, this is probably the best curry I've ever had. So as I explored away from my home, I realized that there's a whole bunch of world all around me that I gotta see. So I kept looking at more and more, and then as I'm starting 16 years old, I'm realizing that I think I'm going to have to get serious in school if I'm going to go far away from home, which happened to be the United States. So I got pretty serious, and sort of the skipping school age was also a very short run. I'd say like a year or two.
Yeah.
Eventually it's like, oh man, I got to study harder. And I learned very early age that at that time that when I skipped school, homework was harder to do. Like, even though I'm pretty smart, or book smart, whatever you're going to call me, but it was hard. I was like, oh my God, maybe I should go to class. And so then you can just finish your homework like in 30 minutes and then you can go. So anyways, that's a learning lesson that I learned. And I also skipped school in Nebraska too. You and I did together, and that was hard. Oh my God, I should get. So long story short, that whole skipping school opened my eyes to the world, which was not near me, around me, and got bigger and bigger. And then eventually the world got bigger for me, and said, I'm going to go to some country I've never been. I'm going to go to the university somewhere I've never been, and I don't even know anyone there. When I landed in Lincoln, Nebraska, I knew nobody, and it was actually an adventure. Every day's an adventure. First meal in Lincoln, Dustin, was Taco Bell bean burrito, and I still have that. It was 30-some years ago. I mean, oh my God, it reminded me of home, like spicy beans and a tortilla. In our culture, you dip the tortilla and eat the beans like that. Well, here's wraps. So this is simpler. I could eat 3 of these, and I could be done in 4 minutes. And so honestly, that whole skipping school opened my eyes to something very constructive, which is that, hey, the world is pretty fantastic, and people are fantastic. In general, people are just great everywhere.
Kind of breaking out of your bubble.
100%. So to this day, I can walk up to anyone and talk to about anything because I took that chance of, and that kind of happened for me organically also too. You know what I mean? And,
sure.
That's where actually I'm gonna stop for a second because I can talk for 4 hours about whatever. So tell me your story about skipping school. How that worked out.
So my story starts even younger than that. Like I wasn't like teenage yet. So I was in 5th grade, so I was probably only about 11 years old or so, about my daughter's age, my youngest child's age right now. So one of my buddies, Jeremy, him and I wanted to go, we wanted to go to Kmart because the new Mad magazine came out. And it was like, back in like the 80s, I don't know if you're familiar with like Mad Magazine, like when we grew
No.
up with them, or but they had like these funny cartoons in them. Some of them were a little bit vulgar or just a little bit off to where not all parents were totally into. But they're like, oh, that's not a very good magazine or whatever. But it was for kids, but it had like some, I don't want to say risque stuff in it, not like that, but it was, there'd be some stuff where parents would be like, "Oh, that's not very cool." But these magazines went really fast. We're like, "Oh, on whatever day it was, it might have been like, say it was a Thursday. I don't remember what day it was of the week." I asked my mom in the morning. I said, can I just not go to school today?" And I said, Jeremy and I want to go to Kmart and want to get the new Mad magazine. And Mom's like, no, you're going to school. And I'm like, dang it, And so I would normally ride my bike over to Jeremy's house, and then we would ride our bikes to school. So I got over to Jeremy's house, and I told him, no, my mom said I can't go. We'll have to try to go this weekend and hope that we can still get the cool new magazine. Anyhow, so we got to talking, and I don't think he ever told his parents too much about what he was doing or whatever. So we just decided we were going to skip school anyhow, and we rode our bikes to Kmart, which is probably a mile and a half from our houses or so. So far enough for like probably 11-year-olds to
Yeah.
bikes to. Well,
Yeah.
back in those days, of course, you don't show up at school and you haven't been called out of school or whatever, then eventually the school called my mom and asked, where's Dustin? And she's like, oh no, he should be at school. And I wasn't. They're like, no, he never came to school. Then she probably remembered the conversation she had where I asked if Jeremy and I could go to Kmart. And anyhow, so she got in the car, she went to Kmart, she found us at Kmart, and then we had to ride our bikes back to school, and then our tail between our legs, and I don't know, we got to school probably like an hour or two late. I don't even remember if we got the magazine we wanted or not. I can't remember that part. I just remember the whole situation. And I think I had detention for like the week, so they made sure that you knew that it's not okay to just not go to school. That was one of the earliest situations. Then
And one of the things you mentioned, that childhood and whatnot, and you're right, life was a lot simpler. And yes, we had video game arcade places. You can go play a video game. Pac-Man was hit at that time. The tank game, forgot the name of that. And then all that stuff was amazing. But I think one of the things I can tell you is that kids had a lot more respect when I was growing up. Not that now all the kids don't, but in general, any adults that you were around were supposed to be called aunt or uncle or sir or something like that. And nowadays, I think that's something, part of that's lost. I see that sometimes in some of the groups of people, but in general, we were supposed to respect anyone who's older than us, whatever, regardless of the age, not 1 year older, but like 5 year or 10 year. Anyone who was more adult than us, we're supposed to respect.
Yeah.
And also discipline. One of the things we have lost, and I guess the cultural differences too, that the fear of discipline also. Yes, skipping school, but when we got caught, we were disciplined. I don't want to go into that here on tape here to how I was disciplined. Just imagine whatever the worst that is in third world country or developing country or whatever that is. That's what it was, and you knew that going in, that if you were caught into pulling a prank or something, but the joy of doing that was so much more than the punishment that you sort of, and you always thought you're not going to get caught. And there's majority of the times that they get caught, which was really sucked. But then you recover, a week or two later, and say, hey, what next, But one thing I want to point out to the audience is that I think we have lost that the moral compass is part of it too. I don't want to make it political or anything like that. That we were very, obedient, making sure that what we said was appropriate in the company of adults, and in a certain way, while we're at a dinner party or dressed in a proper way. If you're going to religious activity, a lot of that is just, and a lot of that still around, but I want to say that was the norm going in. And now you see pockets of people doing it, and they're holding on to traditions in Western culture or Eastern culture. So that's was kind of my experience that you would honestly, I miss that. I miss
Yeah.
that about it because, and I mean, you travel the world, and I love traveling around the world. You know that. I see that a lot. Everywhere. Even I was in Oregon coast, and I was in a small town. And all of a sudden, I started talking to this gentleman who's in his 70s, and he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Why don't you come over here? This is one of the best places to have a meal, and let's talk about this area, how I grew up." And so I think it's the generational gap, which is our generation was in a certain way, and you can see that the more automation is getting, the kids don't understand how to connect with that anymore because they're just much more advanced in technology. And technology has been a big part of it, honestly. We didn't have no phones. A TV which had 3 or 4 channels, maybe five. I don't think there were five.
Yeah.
So we had CNN growing up over there, which was international, CNN International, and I think one or two other channels. And then TV was just a 9 p.m. thing after dinner. You watch TV a little bit, one or two shows. Chips, Starsky and Hutch, they were still playing that there on not Baywatch. I'm sure audience would like to see that, but that was
Yeah.
not happening in Pakistan. So, anyways, so
Yeah, I
overall,
remember growing up in Nebraska for a long time. We only had like three channels, like
yeah,
ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was it.
yeah,
And I think we lived on the edge of town for a while. Then eventually, when we moved into the little bit bigger city, we eventually got cable. But I remember a lot of years growing up where we didn't have anything beyond just your regular stations, and
mm,
to a degree that was fine. After
yeah,
school there might be a little bit of cartoons on for a little while or whatever, and on a Saturday morning there might be cartoons on from 6 or 7 in the morning until 11 or noon, and maybe you watch some cartoons. So I don't really remember watching a ton of TV when I was young. And if it was summertime, you might have you might have got up in the morning and you poured yourself a big bowl of cereal and you ate some cereal, and then you were hopping on your bike and riding over to friends' houses and seeing where everyone is, or grabbing a friend at a time. And if your
mm,
parents didn't know where you were, all they really had to do was one of two things. They could either call some of your friends' parents to find out where people were, or if your parents were coming and going from home and they're driving down the street and they see 5 bikes in Kevin's front yard, they know you're all at Kevin's. So that was kind of the general thing. Although I would say when we were probably, I don't know, 13, 14, riding our bikes all over, there were probably plenty of times where we rode our bikes a heck of a lot further than our parents ever realized we went.
mm,
And some of that was just the pursuit of fun. You're riding around, you're having fun, you're riding over to this park, you go over to this friend's house that lives significantly further away from your little neighborhood group, or
yeah.
or whatever the case happened to be, ride over to this lake or the swimming pool, or, or whatever the case happened to
No,
be,
I think
and you'd
it
be
ties
gone all
into
day.
yeah, it ties into the I think the exploratory nature of when you're growing up and you want to look around. You watch a little kid at the airport, you're traveling, and the baby just learned how to walk, and the baby's taking off one direction, parents is following him. It's a very
Hmm.
similar mentality that I feel like, and again, I'm not an expert at any of this stuff. This is just uh, that was my mentality. Is that what else is out there? And when you see, and I grew up again, the city I grew up in was very large, and then there's Twin City next to it. You really couldn't explore all of it, even though I put a big dent in it. I knew
Yeah.
where the best ice cream was. There was traditional Pakistani ice cream. I knew where the best milkshakes were. I knew, but that only came in me getting out there and learning and meeting people. And in general,
Sure.
I, I don't remember having a weird experience where I thought that I was in danger, like ever. And that's something to be said about. People say, "Oh my God, oh you're in Colombia. Oh my God, what happened?" We were in Bogota not long ago. Well, 5 or 6 years ago, but it was unbelievable. Food was great. People were great. I mean, It looked like a fortress airport, but when you left the airport, it was like, oh, it's just like a road and a nice highway and some big buildings. And so I think that our childhood to today, I would summarize it in a way that I feel like that we've gotten much more closed in. We've lost some of that gentle touch of respect and, affection for others, and we've become a little more selfish as a society versus how I grew up. For example, my mom is making a meal, and I say, "Oh, I don't want to have this weird vegetable, whatever you're making, it's nasty." Oh, I'm leaving my house and going next door across the street from other aunties, our neighbor's house. I said, "Oh yeah, we're making potato this." I said, "Well, I'm just gonna eat it." "Oh, sit down." Like that was the norm. My
Yeah.
mom is amazing cook, so I don't recall having when I was in the teenage years. I don't recall having ever very many meals just with my brother and my mom for lunches. We were always out with friends or their homes or our homes, and we would just sort of the cultural thing of eating together and bringing family and friends together is such an important thing that I grew up with that I practice it today. Like I
Yeah.
have, yeah, people are like, oh, let's go out to eat. For me, I love cooking, so I feel like what I learned in my childhood with the connection of the meal sharing and friendships and like your home. I came to your house not last April. We had a nice little meal with your family. I've never
Yeah.
met your mom before. We've been friends for 30 some years. It was awesome. So
Yeah.
so that's something that I think, I miss, but I practice quite a bit. But in today's busy society, it doesn't happen anymore. So,
I think you're right. We still cook quite a bit, and and it's nice making some meals and sitting down as a family. But I think a lot of people don't do that. We don't do that every day. But
time, time. I mean,
and
we've got,
it's hard with busy lives and stuff like that. But it is nice to try to instill some of that in your kids and the respect, like you mentioned.
yeah,
My kids call you Uncle Cameron because you've been around forever. But
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
there's like certain people that they just know and respect and understand they've been around for a long time. Obviously their aunts and uncles and some of the super close family friends that they'll call aunt and uncle anyhow a lot of times. And it's, I guess, one of those things, trying to instill that in your kids to make sure they've got respect for their elders and stuff like that, because I think that is a disappearing thing. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know.
It's not the parents don't want to. It's just the busyness of whatever. And then I'm not
Yeah.
saying that today's parents are bad parents. I'm not a parent, but I'm not going to have people yelling at me about this. But I'm just saying it's just that we're losing some of that because we've gotten so much busy. I don't get it. Like, how are we so busy? So
Yeah.
as a society, we've gotten so busy with a lot of things, schedules. Every kid has their
Yeah.
own schedule and practices and this and
I
that.
look at some of that too. You're right. I think we've gotten really busy with just life and things, and maybe that makes it harder to instill some of the things into our kids
Yeah.
that when life was slower when I was growing
Yeah.
up. Because I mean, we're talking about going and having fun and riding bikes and everything, but it wasn't all fun and games growing up in the Midwest. We grew up just a normal middle class family, but if I wanted extra money for various things that I wanted to buy the new album or whatever. Usually there was multiple ones that you wanted. You're like, oh, I want the new tape for Metallica or AC/DC or Guns N' Roses or whatever it was, Bon Jovi. It was one of those things where you're like, okay, well, if that cost like 10 or 12 bucks for each one of those you wanted, you were figuring out how, okay, can I mow grandparents' lawns, can I sell some stuff. I know when we were young too, I had a lot of friends that had paper routes and everything. I don't know if you guys had that in
No.
Pakistan. Like, gosh, I remember subbing for one of my buddies that had a paper route anytime they were going out of town, and I knew all of his houses. He had a list, and I'd have to go over to his house, and this big bundle of papers would be there, and you'd have to fold them and put the rubber bands on them and put this big paper carrier thing around your neck to put all the papers in, and then you're riding your bike up and down the streets and throwing the papers on the front porch. And it's usually like if it was like a Saturday or Sunday, it's first thing in the morning. It's 5 or 6 in the morning, and you're delivering the papers because a lot of people get out of bed and get their coffee and have their eggs and toast or whatever they were having for breakfast, and then go grab the paper at the front door. So it better be there. I think back then, like I remember I help one of my buddies quite a bit, and maybe I got a couple dollars a day that I helped him, or whatever, if he was out of town, and so I subbed for him quite a bit. That was in probably, I'm trying to think, at the house we lived at there, that was fourth through sixth grade, so it was probably fifth or sixth grade that I was helping him. And then I think when I got to junior high, had another buddy that had a paper route, and like during the week, Monday through Friday, the papers, you would deliver them like after school, and so they would be there in the evening or whatever, probably when people got off of work or whatever. So I remember plenty of times though where we would divide and conquer. There'd be about like 4 or 5 of us friends, and we'd all want to hang out. We're like, oh, but we got to do Sean's paper route first, and so it'd be like, there might have been like 40 houses or something to do, but there was like 5 of us who were like, okay, you take these 8 houses, you take these 8, and we'd divide and conquer and get it done in like maybe 40 minutes or something like that, and all be back and then have time to hang out and have fun. I remember paper routes were one of those things that were done to make money from like a young age, when you were still too young to get a regular job. I know I eventually got a job at about 15 years old bagging groceries, but that pursuit when you were like 12, 13, 14, and you're like, I'm old enough to do some, various chores and work and things like that, then you were looking for various ways to do that. I remember I got like I think a $20 a month allowance, so about $5 a week, and then I had to make sure the trash was taken out, and then the trash was taken out to the road in the barrels and stuff like that on the proper days. And I think probably mowing the lawn was part of that, doing the dishes and other chores and things like that. But we always had animals. We always had like dogs and cats and things too, so always had to make sure that they got fed at the proper times, and they had fresh water, and all that kind of stuff. So I remember there was always stuff like that to do, but then there were always other things. Like I was always one of those kids I was always trying to think about other ways to make money. And I remember my grandpa owned like an insurance company, and so there was always opportunities to stuff envelopes and make money. He would have like a bunch of stuff printed out, and you'd have to put like 2 or 3 different pages together and fold them in thirds, put them in the envelope, and seal them, and then he would have like a list of addresses they needed to be sent out to, which I don't even know where his addresses came from, but anyhow, so then you'd be filling things out, and I remember I made money stuffing envelopes for him. A lot of kids in the Midwest made money once they were about probably 12, 13, 14 years old or so, detasseling corn. And so this like kind of a Midwest thing, and I don't know if you ever were aware of that, but
I heard that from my spouse. She grew up in a small town, so I heard that. But I just going back on that, that wasn't a thing in the class of area I grew up with.
Yeah.
Kids didn't have jobs no matter how what kind of economic status you had. Where I grew up, even though it was a modest environment, even though my parents were fairly affluent, they lived in a very modest area. I had my first job in Lincoln when I came to Nebraska, University of Nebraska, on campus. So really, work wasn't something they valued more of education and higher grades than anything else. So your allowance and your freedoms were tied into the grades. That's how I grew up. Now I really can't analyze the entire culture or whatnot. So if I did really, really well, I got more things, more rewards from my family. And if I did poorly, then I was, disciplined, and we can get into that sometime what that is. So I almost feel like that today's discipline, again, I'm not, leave in the comments below what you think discipline was for you and what it is for your kids today, because I like to hear more about some
Yeah,
of the audience, what they can talk about discipline of the kids and what that did for us. You know what I mean? At that
yeah,
time, it was terrible. Um,
yeah,
and looking back, it's like, oh, you know what? It passed, and it had a meaning. They were just trying to protect you from making bigger mistakes. So some of that stuck with me. You know, some of the things
yeah,
that I got disciplined for stuck with me, and I didn't do them often. So I think I think overall, I would say um, it was a great childhood, less stress. You explored more. The
yeah,
world wasn't as crappy as you would like to believe at that time, or
yeah,
scary place. Um, and I yet to find that. I don't find it to be scary. Yeah, there is bad things happen. Probability that's very low, and I haven't been a victim of, thank God, anything like that at all. Few ups and downs here and there, but I mean, in
yeah,
general, what I'm saying is that I think that mine would be is that today's kids, they need to leave electronics behind and go explore and learn what they around where they are or surroundings, you know.
yeah.
So anyway, but what
Yeah,
do you
I
think?
hear you. I think it's a challenging thing now to raising kids just because of just the digital stuff out there. You know, they
Yeah,
can be on their phones, on tablets, so there's a lot more distractions. I feel like when I was younger, I had chores and things to do. I guess I just feel like I knew I had to do those things. So the sooner I did those things, the sooner I could go hang out with my friends or whatever, the case happened to be. And I don't know, just with the digital side of things with kids growing up now, if they're more easily distracted. I mean, I feel like it's hard to get, or harder to, get your kids to do the chores and things that I feel like when I was growing up, I just knew I needed to do these things because it was just part of the your routine and your chores and stuff like that. So if I got things done, I could let mom and dad know, hey, I'm done with this, I'm done with that, I'm going to go hang out with my friends or whatever, and fine, you got your stuff done. Sometimes I feel like this day and age, it's a little bit more difficult to get your kids to do all the things that they need to do, or I feel like maybe they need more reminders than we got growing up. But anyhow, and I don't know if that's just a product of the digital world that we live in and that instant gratification with everything else going on, and they don't always want to step away from other things they have going on, or if kids are just busier nowadays with everything else going on in the world. I mean, I do see you'll have your kids that they're talking to friends, they're gaming online with them, and there's a lot more things going on now, even going on within your own home. Whereas back in the day, if you wanted to hang out with your friends, you weren't hanging out with them online. You were trying to finish your chores and things like that, so you could hop on your bike and go see where everybody's at.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it was like one of those things where you weren't, I mean, maybe you got a phone call from a friend or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, come over, we're hanging out over here, we're doing this or whatever." But the other thing I was thinking about too is, I remember like maybe in junior high or so, maybe sixth or seventh grade or something like that. I think one of my buddies that had, I can't remember if I don't remember if his dad was a doctor or what his dad was, but they had extra money. He was one of the first ones to get a Nintendo. But even back then, I don't remember gaming like kids have been gaming in the last 15 years or whatever. You may go and hang out and everybody played a round of Super Mario or Contra or whatever, and you might have been at a friend's house for an hour and a half or something inside, everyone taking turns playing some games, and then you were kind of done. You're like, okay, go back outside and hop on your bikes. I remember making launch ramps for our bikes and just being creative and just doing a lot of things like that outdoors, or going to the pool, or going to the park, or riding to the gas station to get a soda or a candy bar or whatever, but you were constantly active on your bikes at least all summer. And in the Midwest, the summer was, you're out of school, temperatures are nice. Now living here in Phoenix, it's pretty hot in the summer, and so it's kind of a reverse thing where people are outside more in the off season versus the summer. But anyhow, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where you kind of look at things and kind of thinking about how things were different for us and how we made money and and things like that back in the day. But and I never was struggling for things that I needed or anything like that. It was just if I wanted certain additional things that weren't absolutely necessary or whatever, you wanted this tape from this group or whatever, that album, then certain things like that your parents maybe weren't going to buy you. You needed to find some ways to make some extra money to go ahead and be able to buy some of the things you wanted, some magazines, comic books, other things like that you wanted. Your parents may buy some of that stuff for you, but not all of it.
It'd be nice to hear from audience because we'll have audience from all over the world.
Oh yeah,
it'd be nice
definitely.
to hear. It'd be nice to hear on this, and we'll be going back. By the way, this is for the audience.
Sure.
To all the comments you're going to post, even though this podcast gets comments a year from now, we'll address it because these are the genuine topics that we discuss and we want to know more about. And it's all about learning about you, the audience,
Sure.
and sharing our stories. So I think that it'd be great to understand what they see today versus when they were
Sure.
younger.
Yeah, do you feel that you were more responsible as a kid than your kids are now, or vice versa? Or do you have certain distractions that make it challenging parenting kids when we grew up in more of an analog childhood? Now our kids are growing up in a digital childhood, and what challenges does that, present? Because I'm sure a lot of people will have comments about a lot of different things and a lot of things we didn't touch on. We didn't even get too deep into this topic yet today, but I think the comments can be awesome for just painting a picture of what it's been like for people in different parts of the of the world. I think you mentioned something earlier too, Cameron. Did you say when you were in school in Pakistan, was it just Monday through Thursday?
Yeah, Fridays was a Sunday of yours, so Friday was not. Friday was a holiday, so I think it was Saturday. Friday was the only day off, I believe. Not 5. It was 6-day work week, I believe, and I have to think about that because I was
gotcha. Interesting.
School system, Saudi and Pakistan. So I really, until I got to, until I finished the 10th grade, then you go to the university. Like a college, like an actual college, the same college I went to, you can get a master's or a PhD versus 11th and 12th grade. That was a degree that you got, secondary school degree or something like that. So it was a college, not like a uniform and no assembly and you pick 3 or 4 classes and they're going to be Monday or Wednesday or like an actual college. So
Gotcha.
Before that was kind of a skipping school, having a good time between 2 school systems in Saudi and Pakistan. Really, the recollection is not that solid for me because I was having a good time. But when I got to the more of a college environment, I became quite responsible because I knew that I wanted to go overseas to study, and I wanted to really kill it. And then school wasn't too hard for me. I don't want to sound too confident, but I did
School
pretty
wasn't
well.
that hard for me either, so it wasn't, like you mentioned earlier, things being kind of based on your grades. I probably had plenty of leniency because I did pretty well in school. And so it wasn't like a struggle to pass classes or whatever and have your parents worry about things. So probably had a little bit more free reign of things I wanted to do because I was a pretty good kid and I got good grades and I wasn't getting in a bunch of trouble, and stuff like that. I probably didn't skip school again until maybe my junior or senior year, where we used to skip every once in a while, but not that often, and only for like a class period or something to go somewhere else or whatever. But
In 12th grade, I did not skip much. We would skip as a group, really, but that wasn't a thing anymore. Because honestly, it's a cycle. You find something new and exciting, and you do it 10 times or 15 times, and you're sort of done with it. that's the kind of I grew up with. I don't need to be
Yeah.
doing it every day. So, but honestly, I think we can go on this topic for like a year. But I
Oh,
think
I
we're
know.
going to
Yeah.
wrap this up soon. It's 40 minutes already. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more comments on this because we would love to do a follow up on this one.
Yeah.
To,
I think we need to dig into it deeper.
yeah, so it'd be
Definitely.
great to get some ideas and to of an audience as to what they think um, we're talking about and what they've
Yeah.
gone through, and
I think
then we'll
audience comments could lead to like an episode 2 of this, and bringing up various different topics that the audience is mentioning. There's probably a lot of things where we didn't get too heavy into some of this stuff, but there's going to be, as things move along and this channel grows, I think there's going to be a lot more comments about different things, which will probably lead to part 2 that we can do on this topic.
100%,
So,
100%.
so yeah,
Yeah.
definitely leave your thoughts and comments, and we can reply to things and kind of see what everyone else has to say about that.
And we can
So,
also do like a live stream as well, where people can just come in. And I don't know
yeah.
how that works, but you're more expert at that than I am. So,
I would
or
love to do that as we grow and get enough subscribers and everything, and can get enough people that would love to be on a live stream and be able to just chat in the moment about these kind of things.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that would be definitely a lot of fun. So as we anticipate growing this channel, and if you like these kind of topics, and we're going to have lots of different topics like this
Mhm.
that are a lot of fun to discuss, then share the channel with other people. Help us grow so we can get to the point where we can have more engagement and more live streams and things like that, and get to the point where there'll be a lot more fun on the channel. So we're just getting things rolling, but like I think I mentioned in the beginning, this has been 2 or 3 years coming to get to this point, and we have lots of great topics. So there's probably we have topics to last for a couple of years
Or
to
more.
continue to go over all this great
Yeah.
stuff. So anyhow, yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments, and let us know what your thoughts are. This has been the first episode of Johnny Can't Sleep. So, and hopefully we'll be filming on a regular basis and putting more great content out there. So thanks for listening, and catch us in the next one, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything new and good that we put out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.